Hello, welcome to Talkin' Transit, and I'm Subwaymark. Today I'm going to talk about commuter rail or regional rail. What are they? Are they the same? Let's go find out. Today I will break down my definition of commuter rail or regional rail transit. Are they really the same? Or what are they really different? I'm going to talk about that. The whole purpose of this channel is to talk about transit, what the different modes are, and then talk about transit within our cities, both here in the US, Canada, and all over the world. If this interests you, please do subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Talkin' Transit's on this channel, as well as all my other videos of transit, museums, and steam trains, and other forms of rail transit from around the world. So, traditional commuter rail goes back a long time, back to the early railways. So, in the early days of railroads, they noticed a certain type of customer who would typically ride the train every weekday, heading into the city, and then at the end of the day. In order to facilitate and incentivize that kind of rider, they created what they call commutation tickets. So these were usually books of tickets, maybe 10 or 20. They were typically cheaper than the normal fares for the railway between those 2 points. So with commutation became the word commuter, because it was commuters who would buy these commutation tickets, because they were the regulars and they wanted the discounted fares because they were riding the train so often. With this pattern of ridership in the morning and the evening, mainline railroads developed commuter trains. So they usually were not as fancy as the long distance trains, because they were really designed to just take workers into the city in the morning and take them home in the evening. So hence commuter rail was really born, and this was back in the late 1800s. Typically commuter trains did not run much beyond what's considered commute zone of that city. So typically most people won't commute more than an hour, so about an hour by rail outside the city was typically the end of the commute zone. Within that commute zone, there'd be much more frequent service in the morning and much more frequent service in the evening to help facilitate those commuters to get to work and come home and be regular customers. Commuter rail today is pretty much the same, where it's designed to bring people into the city in the morning and bring people out of the city in the evening, with maybe some trips during the midday and weekends, but really focused on those daily commuters. In the United States, the oldest commuter railway that's still in existence under its original charter is the Long Island Railroad. It's also the nation's busiest commuter rail. It was chartered back in 1834. Basically, it took riders from Long Island into New York City every day. Originally, those commuter trains ended at the East River and folks would have to board a ferry to get into Manhattan, but later, when the Pennsylvania Railroad built Penn Station in New York and absorbed the Long Island Railroad, those trains were able to go into Manhattan, into Penn Station, which still exists today, although not in the grandiose form that it once, but Penn Station is slowly coming back to be the true mecca that it is. And Penn Station today is the nation's busiest rail station. Today, the Long Island Railroad is part of the New York MTA. Also under the MTA is another commuter rail network called Metro North. Metro North is the lineage of the Penn Central as well as the New Haven lines that all filtered into Grand Central Terminal. Another commuter rail network that also serves the New York area is New Jersey Transit, which is another amalgamation of different commuter rail lines into New York City, like the Pennsylvania Railroad, like the Central Railroad New Jersey, and others that all eventually came under the New Jersey Transit banner. All three services in New York are your traditional commuter rail. The heaviest ridership and number of trains is in the morning peak and in the evening peak. Midday, some lines actually see no service, other lines see some service. Some are better than others. But it's your typical commuter rail pattern. And on weekends, there are some lines that see no service again, and some that see sporadic service throughout the day. So that's your traditional commuter rail. Other traditional commuter rail in the United States is in Chicago, Metra. So Metra has a series of different rail lines that are all from legacy railroads. Some of them are actually run by the railroads to this day, but under the Metra banner, and that would be Union Pacific and Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Traditional commuter patterns in the morning and the evening. So that's your traditional commuter rail. And there are other commuter rails around the nation and around the world that have that similar pattern, but those are just kind of the examples. Commuter rail is old-fashioned. Now you're starting to see this term called regional rail. And regional rail is commuter rail-like. It's born from the mainline railroads and still filters a lot of people in the city, very commute pattern oriented, but has more service throughout the day. So it's designed to be a all-day service and all-weekend service. Much more higher quality than commuter rail. Examples of regional rail around the world could be first point to Paris with the RER, which is a commuter rail network that also runs on mainline tracks, but goes right through the center of the city, has several stops in the city, so you don't have to transfer necessarily to another system to get around. Although the metro in Paris will get you closer to where you need to go, but at least you don't have to end at a terminal, and these trains go through the city, so you could go suburb to suburb, unlike in New York, where if you want to go from Long Island to, say, Westchester County, you have to change trains. And actually, up until this year, that was an arduous task, because Long Island Railroad, you'd go into Penn Station, then you'd have to figure out how to get to Grand Central to take Metro northbound. So the whole idea is to unite these networks to go through the city, so you can go one end to the other, from one suburb to another suburb, or go into the city. So some regional rail has more metro-like characteristics, so very high frequency in the center section, but unlike metro lines, has much lower frequency maybe on the extremities, because there are going to be some services that are going to be hardly any service, or just maybe once or twice an hour on some of the branches. But the main trunk will have a service every 5 minutes, because all those lines come together on the one line to come into the city. Other examples of regional rail, you could point to the brand new line in London, the Elizabeth line. Now some folks may consider the Elizabeth line part of the tube because it's on the tube map, but it is not. It is really a regional rail network linking far-flung commuter lines through the center of London, so you can get from Reading on one side, go through London, and head out to Abbey Wood on the other side of town. Another example of regional rail can be found right here in the United States, and that's in Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, their commuter rail networks were traditional commuter rail, one from the Reading and one from the Pennsylvania, that all had city-bound traffic, and they both lines terminated in the center city. But Philadelphia linked those two lines through an underground tunnel, through the city center tunnel, and now those lines all go through the city. Yes, some trains do terminate in downtown, but many go through to link the other sides. The Philadelphia Regional Rail Network has much more service patterns during the midday. The Regional Rail Network in Philly also links downtown Philadelphia to their airport. Other networks that are regional rail-like would be, in Germany, you have the S-Bahn system. S-Bahn, you could even say, is suburban rail. It's a very high-quality network that is more regional rail-based. So good service throughout the day with some extra trains during the peak periods. So what is the difference between regional rail or commuter rail with heavy rail? Well, I already kind of talked about that. Maybe a little bit more. So one, regional rail trains are typically longer trains than metros or heavy rail systems. They'll have very long trains, and they'll be of mainline size characteristics, from tunnels to the stations to the trains themselves. That is because most regional networks run on mainline rail. So they are basically commuter rail networks. They have to be able to operate on regular rail lines too. So that leads to much larger rolling stock, much larger tunnels and stations. Now, an exception to regional rail versus heavy rail or subways would be in Japan. So in Tokyo, the commuter trains would come in to the transition point between the commuter rail network and the metro network, and they would actually change crews, but not trains. So the passengers from far away wouldn't need to change trains to enter the metro network. So that leads to confusion. Is the Tokyo subway network regional rail? Not all the subway lines in Tokyo are that way. Some are, some aren't. But I try to keep that definition separate. I don't consider the Tokyo metro lines or the Toei subway lines to be regional rail, even though they have regional rail trains that go through it. And I will talk more about Tokyo in a future video. So in this post-pandemic world, the lines between commuter rail and regional rail is kind of getting blurred. So a lot of commuter rail networks have noticed that ridership patterns have changed. It's become a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday commute pattern, with Monday and Fridays being less commute pattern. The other thing that they are seeing is the commuter patterns have changed in the fact that the morning peak and the afternoon peak is not as severe. It's still very, very busy, but not like it used to be. However, the shoulders of the peaks and midday has seen much more higher ridership, and especially on weekends. Surprisingly, that's where the biggest gain has been in this post-pandemic world. So that means these networks are starting to look at, should they become more regional rail-like? In other words, yeah, they still may terminate in the city, but have more regular service throughout the day and on weekends. So instead of a train an hour, or maybe a train every half hour, maybe a train every 15 minutes throughout the day with higher service during the peaks. So that means they're less commuter oriented and become more regional rail oriented. Now there are some oddball commuter rail networks, and I'll cover them in future videos, but one quick one I would like to discuss is West Commuter Rail in Oregon. This connects Wilsonville to Beaverton, which is not going to downtown Portland. It's basically going suburb to suburb. So that makes it unique. I do want to dive into that as a separate video because there's lots of shortcomings with the West Rail, but it does parallel a busy commute corridor. So does that make it commuter rail? Well, it is, because it only runs in the peak periods, in the mornings and in the afternoons. It doesn't run midday. But again, I'm going to save that for a future video. There are a lot of other commuter rail networks I can talk about. There's plenty of them around. I mean, California has Metrolink in LA, and then also in San Francisco you have Caltrain, and just north of San Francisco you have the Smart Train. Seattle has the Sounder trains. So there's plenty of commuter rail networks. I will cover them in detail in other videos. Well, I hope you liked my take on commuter versus regional rail today. If you did enjoy this video, please do hit the like button and hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you'll be notified anytime I publish a new video to my channel. So until next time, watch and close the doors, and I'll see you at the next station. Bye now.